Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John's reports for the 28th. And we continue along in our little sideways consolidation is what I've been referring to it. As we've been seeing some slight improvements with the steel moving higher here, and that's allowed for, the support, if you will, for the general decline that we're in. I mean, we're still in a very weak overall position because, as you can see, the steel has not reset below red DOC here to give you a clean bill of health, at least from the interactions between the green. Now, every time the green gets over cyan, that's, a fairly bullish situation. But then once it started to separate, it became clear that there was going to be problems. And then you get a little bit deeper when you get steel crossing below cyan, and a little bit more positive when it comes back above. But we're still in a declining red DOC. And once we broke that zone, we knew that we were going to have further downside to it. That it even held up at the 23% was just a little violent reaction. We're probably just going to ease back through that. You will note that we are just about at the ABM green level. We go ahead and put up those, the deal slow right there, 28.59.75. That's sort of an important one because below that, I think that you head straight to the 23%, which is at 28.35. But likewise, getting back here above the ABM yellow at 88, it presents some opportunities. Now, we've been talking about the same ranges on the 5K for some time, and we're still within those same ones. I mean, it makes it much easier to be able to play right around those, which really kind of what happened all day yesterday. We talked about that. That resistance has been around the 29 on the ES, at least the 29.30 range, and unable to really sustain anything past that. And then it just leaves, our key areas, the 29.05, and then once you break it, you get to 28.80, 28.70. So we had quite a few, and then the low side was the 28.40s. From an NQ standpoint, looking pretty identical. I think it's just a little bit weaker, actually, with the steel failing to get a strong crossover there, and that may suffer a little bit more. Still, it's doing better relative to its ABM than the S&P or the ES is. From a Euro standpoint, again, it's just, it became very stark at the G7 there, seeing the difference between where the economies lie, the prospects for expansion versus just stagnation. I mean, Europe has just got a ton of problems that they're not getting away from anytime soon. Oil, again, is holding up into the same range. There's a lot of doom and gloomers out there that's saying, with the economy is shutting down and that, and if it were the case, you don't think that these guys would be holding on to oil futures? No, not going to happen. And gold, still skyrocketing, no question about that. I think that's just going to be the trend going forward for quite a while now. There's no reason why that would cease. Turning to the lovely 5K, so in the pre-market there was the little bit of boost. We were again right at that 28.80, dipped below it briefly, and then had a nice little violent reaction up. Cyan moved below red, and we popped all the way back up to the peaks right here, just below the 2900 in this case, and that produced significant resistance. The interesting setup with this is we look at the shakeout indicator right down here. You can see that we popped above 25 with the magenta. And so in that rise, not really excited about this little pops right here where you see the purple candles are just designed to let you know where DOC spread took place. But we're always looking for the optimal one, which is usually where you have steel coming from above red back below, green crosses below red, cyan moves above. Orange obviously spiking above steel, and that really helps as well. In this case, right here, slightly above, you could have waited until it actually crossed below. Would have given you better entry. And then it was just a matter of waiting because that cascade started. We have this decent setup here, but the problem is, you don't have really a phenomenal buy configuration simply because you're in that first dip, and this is what I talk about. Even though the criteria-wise, it meets the crossover of yellow above magenta, meets the two factors, still below the -13. So all those things were good, and then it came up green crosses cyan, all perfect, so everything you're looking for, but it's like just a couple of bars later that you get the rejection actually began right there. And if you weren't convinced, the next bar, boom. So at best, this was a small loose break even at best for you. And then it was just a clear sign that, hey, this is going to travel lower again. And sure enough, it did. But did finally produce improving situations, similar though. But you see the difference is now you've had a series of these dips, and finally it's in a much higher ratio. And that improved shakeout building has allowed you also to see the DOC red move above 13.5. It did so even here. So this was, I thought, hey, maybe this would be the bounce back. But coming off of those longer first declines, usually you have to have a second a rollover and then a build. And that's where we created the P2s from. But the P2s got to respond to an actual shakeout reading and DOC that's going to give you the impetus to drive it. And without a strong reset with the steel either coming from below cyan back above, there's no power there. It's just one group working independent of the others. Let's try and move this chart over a little bit so we can get to current. So that led to a nice pop that brought us all the way back, falling 100%. Morganacci is always calling price up to the 100%, which is exactly what it did. But again, the 100% turns out to be exactly that 2880 that we talked about. And of course, there's the 2870. So boom, hits it. So that break of it, we moved back above it, and we're caught in between that range of it right now. We just plummeted, hitting back up against that same resistance. So I think that's just going to be the range for the moment. We're going to get an end of month play here. Could start any time. So I would be actively watching that one, and I don't know that we're expecting any major excitement unless there's some special news that breaks something. But I think that with the general weakness, there's still a small bias to the downside until that daily chart changes up. If we look at a 50K, let's put up a 50K. Why not? Because it's been doing okay. It had that couple of days ago, bought at the bottom there, bought it again. It's got out a little early from its viewpoint. This was a good move, except for the DOC spread came in there. One loss, one gain, kind of break-even setup from it there. It's sort of like this dip right here. It's not bad because you did have the steel crossing over at the same time you were having a crossover setup there. The issue is once you had the green over cyan, it needed to hold itself. Now we're getting the potential of an inverse right there, but green is still above red. And red is almost broke into that new zone. It's minus 731. So if it gets a little bit better, that's still over the 7.5. So if that can maintain itself, that might be enough to drive it back up higher. So from a 50K standpoint, everything's still looking for a little bit more upside push, but it's tight. It's not like we're getting some major dramatic. And we didn't really have a super huge dip of the red to give us an oversold kind of condition. So end of month play, not a surprise. Hopefully, maybe in the next day I'll be able to show some of the alterations that I've made for the 50K that will be indicated for the paint bar that's going to be adjusted for the indicators, which I think is really becoming pretty tightly focused because we're able to identify very clearly these reset setups that have potential for a stronger move versus ones that are still good but less likely to produce significant trend move. So I think that's going to be extraordinarily helpful. And I'm hoping to lay it out with the colored paint bars so that you don't have to know all the different conditions, though I'll still go over all the conditions because I think it's important that you're able to see how it functions in the interrelations between the two, between all the different indicators and how they all tie in together that way. But as always, I will put up anything relevant on the Skype chat. Trade well. Talk to you soon.